Hello and welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're walking through a remarkably profound turning point in a narrative I know so many of you have been following closely. We're looking at part 15, The Truth About Emma. Honestly, I'd invite you to just settle in for this one because what we're looking at today is a deeply personal, incredibly raw psychological reveal. It all centers around a single letter. A letter from a grandmother that just completely unravels years and years of quiet misunderstandings and long held family resentments. It's really a story about realizing that the roles we play in our families aren't always the ones we chose for ourselves. So let's just dive right into this letter and see what it uncovers. I want to start right here with this incredibly powerful quote. The adults had trained both of us. Just take a second and think about your own childhood memories. How often do we look back and just assume that a sibling was, born that way, that they were just naturally difficult or selfish or quiet? Well, this letter flips that assumption entirely on its head. It drops us into the staggering realization that, without even knowing it, the adults in their lives had actively, albeit unconsciously, conditioned both sisters into the people they became. And to truly grasp this, we have to look at the hidden root causes behind Emma's behavior. Section 1. The Childhood Dynamic. Grandma's letter systematically breaks down this psychological training, and honestly, it is heartbreaking to see it laid out so plainly. You can see the exact pattern here. First, whenever Emma cried, the adults just gave her what she wanted. Second, whenever she got jealous, they rewarded her, literally just to stop the conflict. And third, whenever Emma demanded something that actually belonged to the narrator, the adults didn't correct Emma. Nope, they turned to the narrator and asked her to be the good child. They systematically conditioned them. Unearned rewards for one child and forced quiet sacrifices for the other. Section 2. Entitlement and Invisibility. This relentless cycle of rewards and sacrifices leads to a really devastating conclusion about what these kids were actually being taught. On one side, Emma learned that taking brought immediate rewards. She was taught entitlement. On the other side, the narrator learned that giving up, basically surrendering her own needs, was the only way to earn approval. She was taught invisibility. But what hits so hard here is Grandma's explicit realization. She wrote, "Neither of you deserved that." Emma was robbed of the chance to learn empathy, and the narrator was robbed of her voice. Neither child deserved that fate. Section 3. The Truth Revealed. Armed with this new context, we reach a pivotal moment. For years, the narrator believed one simple, painful thing, that Emma was just cruel. But now, she saw something entirely different. Yes, Emma made terrible choices, but those terrible choices were actively encouraged by the exact people who should have corrected her. The adults enabled the cruelty. They paved the road for it. And that's such a heavy realization, isn't it? That the person hurting you was really just following the script they were handed. Section 4. Redefining forgiveness. This brings us to a part of the text that will absolutely resonate with anyone who has struggled with a painful past. Grandma's letter offers a path forward by redefining forgiveness. She writes, "Forgiveness is not pretending the past never happened." So often, we're told to just forgive and forget, right? As if wiping the slate clean is the only way to heal. But this beautifully refutes that. Moving forward doesn't mean erasing history. It definitely doesn't mean invalidating the very real pain you went through. Instead, the letter offers this defining statement. Forgiveness is refusing to let the past decide who you become. It's just a brilliant illustration of taking back control. You're choosing to step out of that invisible role you were assigned. You are refusing to let old wounds dictate your future identity. And then, the letter leaves her with this final, stunning piece of advice. But please don't spend your future trying to win a competition that should never have existed. After reading those words, the narrator carefully folded the letter. And in that quiet moment, something shifted. For the very first time, all that burning, lifelong anger was just gone. It was replaced simply by sadness. A really quiet, profound grief for the childhoods that both she and Emma had lost to this artificial competition. Section 5. An Unexpected Arrival. And it's right in that exact moment of vulnerable clarity, when the anger has finally washed away, that the narrative pivots. The text sets the scene so simply. Just as she finishes folding the letter, the narrator notes, "Then I heard footsteps outside." It was Emma, the very person she had just spent this entire emotional journey rethinking, standing right there on the porch. And we're left with this final, lingering image. She was holding an old cardboard box. After all this time, After all the conditioning, what has Emma brought to the porch? We're left with a hint that part 16 will feature Emma finally apologizing, but we are absolutely desperate to know the details. What do you think is in that box? And more importantly, do you think the narrator is finally ready to open it? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this deep dive helped illuminate the psychological layers of this story for you. See you next time.
Welcome to today's explainer. We're diving right in today because we're exploring something incredibly personal. I'm going to unpack a profound life experience with you. We'll walk step by step through a story about family, deep-seated rivalry, and the literal psychological weight of the things we hold on to. This isn't just about a sibling conflict, It's a look at the anatomy of an apology and the true cost of always needing to win. I want you to picture sitting on a quiet porch, the air just heavy with years of unspoken words, as we go through this journey together.
It all started with a simple cardboard box. Emma walked up to my porch and she handed it to me. Her voice was so quiet, she just looked at me and said, "I found these in my attic." You could practically feel the hesitation hanging in the air. There was no grand entrance, no loud announcement, just a quiet surrender of a box that had been hidden away for years, covered in the dust of our shared past.
Section 1. The Box of Memories, a Hidden Past.
When someone hands you a piece of your past, you don't just open it, you brace yourself. What was inside this box wasn't just old junk. It was a carefully preserved collection of lost time. Literally, a physical manifestation of memories that had inexplicably gone missing so many years ago. Inside that box was a totally random yet deeply significant collection of my life. Things I hadn't seen in years. The silver bell from my pink bicycle. My absolute favorite stuffed rabbit. A friendship bracelet I'd carefully knotted together back in the 4th grade. The blue sketchbook that I honestly thought was lost forever. And even the tiny seashell necklace that Ryan had given me long before everything fell apart. Seeing them all together, it brought back the exact sinking feeling of losing every single one of them.
As I was just staring at these pieces of my childhood, Emma whispered this confession. She said, "I kept them. I don't even know why." The confusion in her voice was so genuine. It wasn't malicious, not in that moment. It was the sound of someone who had been operating on a painful, unconscious script for her entire life, finally looking at the evidence of her own actions and just not understanding the stranger who committed them.
Section 2. Uncovering the Hidden Truth. Emma's motivation.
See, hoarding someone else's memories isn't really about the objects themselves. It's about what those objects represent. I had to know the underlying reason behind this lifelong sibling rivalry. I looked right at her, and I asked the one question that had been haunting me. Why did you really take everything? She didn't answer right away. The gravity of that question just hung heavily in the air between us. She slowly sat down on the porch steps, gathering the courage to finally speak the truth.
When she finally spoke, her words totally shattered the armor we'd both been wearing for decades. She said, "When we were kids, I thought if people loved you, they would stop loving me. Hearing that, it just breaks your heart." Suddenly, I remembered Grandma's letter, and all the pieces started falling into place. It was the sudden, agonizing understanding of a child's flawed logic. In Emma's mind, love wasn't infinite. It was a finite resource, and every drop of affection I received was a drop she felt she was losing.
She kept going, explaining the heartbreaking root of it all. So every time you loved something, I convinced myself I needed it more. It's just a devastating cycle of jealousy. And you want to know the bitterest irony of all? She gave this incredibly bitter, hollow smile and told me that the strangest part was that none of it ever made her happy. Stealing my joy never actually filled her own emptiness.
Section 3. The Heavy Cost of Winning. The Fallout and Loss.
Emma's need to take, her need to possess what others loved, it didn't stop in childhood. It bled right into her adult life, turning into a compulsion that took a devastating toll on her personal world. It is just so incredibly heavy to look back on. Emma ruined almost every relationship she ever had. Ryan left her after 2 years together, and his reason? He said she always needed to win. Then her fiancé ended their engagement, and over the years, her closest friends just slowly disappeared. Her behavior compounded, layer by layer, loss by loss, until the people who tried to love her were completely driven away.
And I believed her when she told me this, because despite all of her external success, sitting there on the porch steps, she looked completely broken. She said, "I spent my whole life collecting things, and somehow ended up completely alone." It is a profound, crushing realization.
She had built a fortress out of stolen victories and taken treasures, only to realize it was actually a prison.
Section 4. A plea for sisterhood. A fragile step.
But from that total despair, the narrative actually shifts. Once you hit rock bottom and the truth is laid entirely bare, there's finally room for something else, something warm, a very fragile, cautious step toward emotional resolution. She looked up at me, and there were tears welling in her eyes. Her vulnerability in this moment was absolute. She told me, I know saying sorry isn't enough. It never will be. And she was right. A simple apology cannot instantly fix a lifetime of damage, of missing memories, and broken trust. But the fact that she acknowledged it, that she wasn't demanding instant absolution, it completely changed the interview on that porch.
And then she offered this final plea. But if there's even a tiny chance, I'd like to try being your sister. It was delivered with such desperate sincerity, just a delicate, hopeful offering from someone who had finally stopped trying to win and was instead just asking to belong.
Which leads us with a really difficult question. Can a lifetime of betrayal truly be forgiven in a single moment? It's a huge question of human nature, of healing, and of boundaries. And I will tell you this, I didn't forgive her immediately. The damage was way too deep for a quick fix. But the door had finally been opened. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep reflecting on this, and I'll see you in the next chapter as we explore exactly what happened next.
She never took the most important thing. Let's jump right into this explainer because this one, it's a deeply personal journey for me. It's a story of profound loss, childhood betrayal, and ultimately of profound healing. We're going to look closely at my story. Let's begin by looking at the very foundation of where all this starts.
I used to believe my sister took everything from me. When you carry a belief like that, it colors absolutely every single interaction, every memory, every shadow of your past. The word everything leaves no room for anything else. To truly understand the anatomy of healing, we have to first understand the complete, heavy totality of that initial pain.
Section 1. The things Emma took. It wasn't just one sweeping event. It was my toys, my friends, my first love, my confidence, even pieces of my childhood. Seeing it laid out point by point like that, it was just a devastating inventory of a young life being dismantled by someone so incredibly close to you.
For a long time, that was my entire story. There was no other narrative for me. There was no other way of seeing the world. The pain of what was taken became the only lens through which I viewed my own existence.
Section 2. What mattered most. But I was wrong. Realizing that the story of total defeat you've been telling yourself is actually incorrect, that is the very first step toward taking your power back. I wasn't just slightly mistaken here. The entire premise of my loss was completely flawed.
You see, there was a massive difference between the tangible, superficial things my sister took and the one thing that mattered most. The things she could take were literally never in the same league as the things she couldn't touch.
She never took my ability to become someone kind. She never took my dreams, and she never took my future. No matter how much she took from my past, she had absolutely zero access to my core character. My kindness, my vision for myself, my timeline, those were untouchable.
Section 3. Grandma's greatest gift. When we think of a grandparent's legacy, we usually think of inheritance, right? But her greatest gift wasn't her house. It wasn't her savings. It wasn't even her deeply personal diary. Stripping away all those physical items clears the space for something far, far more valuable.
It was the truth. Not objects that can be taken or lost, but an undeniable, indestructible truth.
Section 4. The truth of my worth.
The truth that I had always mattered. Really let the gravity of those words sink in. Not that I mattered because of what I had or who liked me or what toys I possessed, but that I had always mattered, inherently, quietly.
The truth that someone had seen my pain. There is such an immense, profound comfort in being witnessed. When you're quietly losing pieces of your childhood, the absolute deepest fear is that you are completely invisible. Grandma's gift was the validation that I wasn't. The pain was real, and it was acknowledged by someone who loved me.
And the truth that my worth had never depended on being chosen first. This is the ultimate liberation. For years, success felt like a competition about who got the friends or the attention first. But true worth operates on a completely different scale. It is an enduring, unshakable baseline.
Section 5. Redefining my life. I finally understood something. This right here is the bridge. This is the exact moment where the victim of a story steps out of the shadows and becomes the architect of a completely new life.
My life was no longer defined by everything Emma took. That was passive. That was looking backward at a shrinking world. Instead, my life was redefined by what I built. That is active. That's looking forward, creating and expanding. The narrative is completely about the new structures being raised.
It was defined by everything I built after I stopped letting her define me. If there is just one thing you take away from this explainer today, let it be this. The moment you stop allowing those who betrayed you to write your story, you realized your hands have always been free to build something beautiful. The power was never in what was taken away. The power was always in what you choose to create with what remains.
So, I want to leave you with this question. If no one can take your worth, what will you build next? Take a moment to really think about that. When you remove the limits placed on you by the past, the horizon opens up completely. Thank you so much for walking through this deeply personal journey with me. Be sure to join us for our next explainer, Part 20, exploring how absolutely no one can take your worth. Until then, focus on what you're building.
Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into something super personal. Part 20, No One Can Take Your Worth. So settle in, because we're really going to unpack the whole architecture of self-worth, that raw vulnerability we feel in childhood, and what it actually means to finally see yourself.
Let me ask you something. Have you always felt invisible while someone else received all the praise and love? You know, it's this very specific, quiet ache. The story we're looking at today is really for anyone who has spent their life feeling overshadowed, just desperately wishing that that kind of validation was yours.
But here is this massive core truth that we literally forget all the time. Someone else's light does not make yours disappear. We get totally trapped in this idea that love or praise is some kind of zero-sum game, like there's only so much to go around. But honestly, you never have to win against anyone to prove your intrinsic value. Your light exists entirely independent of theirs.
When we feel invisible, our first instinct is usually to try and change ourselves, right? But here's the thing. You don't have to become louder, you don't have to become more beautiful, and you definitely don't have to become more successful. Forcing yourself to cram into some totally different mold is just not the answer to being seen.
Actually, the solution is staggeringly simple. You simply have to become yourself. Just yourself. There is so much quiet strength in that realization, you know? It isn't about adding layers to your personality, it's about stripping away all those heavy expectations and just returning to who you inherently are. And honestly, this realization completely redefines your relationships. Think about this for a second. The people who truly love you will never ask you to become smaller so someone else can feel bigger. Wow. If you're in a situation right now where you are constantly being asked to shrink, well, it might be time to find some new people. It completely shatters the idea that true love requires you to compromise your own presence.
So, where does this kind of unshakable confidence even come from? Well, it comes from this deeply personal, incredibly powerful lesson passed down from a grandmother. She said, "The moment you realize your worth, no one can ever take it away again." Once you have that paradigm shift in your own head, the power is entirely yours. It just becomes this permanent fixture inside of you.
Getting to that point, though, it wasn't without some really deep sorrow. Listen to this painful, lingering sting of betrayal. I spent my childhood believing my sister had taken everything from me. You can just feel the heavy burden in those words, can't you? That awful pain of believing the person closest to you somehow just drained your life of its potential.
But out of that really dark pain comes this absolutely incredible, triumphant realization. Yeah, okay, the things that could be replaced, sure, those were taken. But think about what remained completely untouched through all of that. My future, my dreams, my heart, my life. They are still mine. Those irreplaceable pieces of who you actually are, they were never actually gone.
Which brings us to a really heartfelt final message today. Thank you for watching. Until our next story, take care and stay strong. We've gone from the really sharp sting of feeling invisible all the way to building this unshakable foundation of self-worth in this explainer today. So I want to leave you with this one question to think about. If your irreplaceable heart and your dreams are still entirely yours, what incredible things are you going to do with them today? Take care of yourselves and keep learning.
I found it. It's just as beautiful as I remember.
Look at me, Mom. I'm doing it.
You're doing so well, my love.